On today's podcast, I am joined by Jorge, and we have a special guest named Randy. We are going to be covering the book Ender's Game, so I hope you enjoy. For today's episode, I looked up Ender's Game analysis on YouTube. And the very first one that comes up is Thug Notes, Ender's Game. So, huge shout out to Wisecrack and that video because that was freaking awesome. Jorge watched it too.
Yeah, it was pretty great.
Yeah.
It was the first book review that I was really interested in.
The dude does it in the point of view from a thug from the hood.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I'm only assuming the hood. He could have been a suburban thug. I don't know. I don't know if such a thing exists, but it's a good thing. But Randy, welcome to the first podcast. I'm hoping to have you on because I can honestly say you're probably one of the most interesting people I personally know. So kind of introduce the world to yourself. Like, let people know who Randy is.
Randy's just a working guy, making it through the world, trying to get through this craziness, just so I can come home, lay on the bed, do podcasts, and have people think I'm interesting for some strange reason. Yeah, I think it's because I'm old. That's really what it is.
Man, you're seasoned. That's that's the way I like to say it. You're peppered,
Yeah, well,
peppered
when you
with
get
life.
Old as I am, you'll have plenty to talk about too. I guarantee it.
And you got there way more levels than both of us.
Yeah, if you were a video game, you'd be like the ultra, like broken, like I know all the cheat codes now. we're still struggling through the first bosses.
You'll make it.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that, Randy. Appreciate it. So talk to me, Randy. Why Ender's Game?
Ender's Game. The story itself, if you take the science fiction out of it, if you don't worry about the aliens and the war, just the psychological aspect of what those children were, why they existed, and the people that created them for all intents and purposes, and what they needed to do to use them, they were tools. And like the quote that I did today on Hangouts while we were at work, you're free until your race needs you. That's a very poignant statement, that you have freedom, but if your race needs you, you're a tool. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the one.
So clarify what you mean for somebody that's never read Ender's Game, what you mean by when your race needs you.
Well, in the book, the story, the humans have been fighting this war against these aliens, the Formics. They call them buggers because they're insects, and they're losing bad to the point to where their last resort. And it's not explicitly clear in the book, but I believe that the children had to be genetically engineered in some way, shape, or form. And then they were being monitored by the powers that be, because the Earth's last resort was to find some people that could come up with some tactics, some methods, or thought process that was completely different, because humans were losing and what they were doing wasn't working. And it was a last resort, desperation.
Got you. And I think it's interesting to point out, like you said, the psychology of the book, I think, is where it really shines through, right?
Yeah.
And one of the main character, Ender, right, which his name is not really Ender, it's it's ironically a cute pet name that his sister came up with when she was smaller, because she couldn't say Andrew, right? So she probably tried to say Andrew and came out with Ender somehow, like little kids do. But it ended up being pretty heavy foreshadowing on the author's part, right? On what his goal was. He needed to eradicate the threat.
Yep.
And the whole point of the book, and in the beginning, he says, one of the things he says, this was going to be an unpleasant outcome. I just wanted to be the one who wasn't the saddest or had the worst of the outcomes.
Yeah.
So he knew, like, very early on that things weren't going to play out the way he wanted. He just wanted to make the best of the situation.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know, like, so what part of the book kind of inspired you? Because kind of give people background on what you ended up doing as an early adult and why it formed a high why you hold that book in high regard.
I I was in the military when I got out of high school, and ended up in a command position. I don't know how it happened. It just worked out that way. And once you have the once your decisions impact other people, and and I mean really impact, that starts to, you got to figure out a way to deal with that and be good about what you're doing. Um, the book, for example, Bonzo, great soldier, great officer, horrible leader. What I learned from that book was there's no rank among equals. I don't care what you have on your shoulder at the time. You know, you work together. You come up with a plan, you ask your teammates to poke holes in it. You lead with compassion. You have compassion for your people. I love the fact that Ender led by basically knowing what needed to be done and using the other, we'll call them inferior officers, for example. He knew, for example, and we'll get into that, I'm sure, later with Bonzo, but he knew what to say to Bonzo to let him save face, and still basically Ender fought him without fighting that first time by taking his command away. And he took his command away in front of his other troops by basically showing the other troops that he had more respect for his people, and he understood his people and cared about his people. The folks that I worked with were for years were, they're relatives to me. They're part of me. And when you work with people like that for years, you don't have to think about things anymore. You know where everybody's going to be. You know what they're going to do. You're like one unit, one thing, one entity. And it's a wonderful feeling when everybody communicates that way, but you can't do that unless everybody cares. And if you have compassion, you lead with, I lead with compassion.
Right. And that's a really admirable thing. And I thought it was interesting. Like, before I even read the book, I had seen the movie, which does not do the book any justice. No, I mean, and it's usually the case. Jorge has gone on a couple rants after watching a movie that's based off of a book. But I just thought it was really interesting that is what affected you. And I hadn't read the book first, but I've always been of the mind thought. I've had a couple of supervisor positions in my life where I had to manage people, and I usually won people's respect over because I treated everybody with respect, right? Yeah. Compassion, like, hey, look, I understand that this is not ideal, but this is what needs to be done, and when I thought a call was wrong, I would say it out loud. Hey, a call's wrong, but this is what we got to do, right? So I think that's interesting. But from your experience, I know from my experience, but just an interesting take, especially since you've been in the military, is that usually the case?
So I was enlisted before I became an officer, So the officers that graduated from the Air Force Academy did not consider me an equal, basically. Even though I carried the same rank, I didn't graduate from the academy. I felt completely the other way. I had experience as an enlisted person. And when I became an officer, I went straight back to the same enlisted people that I'd worked with for years. The only difference was I had shiny stuff on my shoulder, and then now I was responsible. So um, I think that a prior enlisted soldier makes a much better officer, because the academy graduates would tell me, don't get down there in the dirt with your troops. You order them, tell them what to do. And my logic was, if I get down and do the same thing they do, when I start yelling and barking orders, they're going to do what I say out of respect, because I'm doing the same thing. If you know, I can't tell somebody to do something that I can't do myself as well, and won't do myself as well. You know, and so that was kind of the dichotomy of being an officer. So, you know, people go, well, you've got enlisted and you've got officers. Well, within those groups, there are cliques like you wouldn't believe, you know. And so being prior enlisted and then coming into officer ranks, yeah, I was not quite considered the equals of the academy graduates, because I didn't have an academy ring. And, you know, I taught skydiving at the academy as a TDY and for extra credit, you know, but not as an officer. I was enlisted when I taught there. And the cadets, some cadets would show me respect, some cadets wouldn't, but cadets have no rank. And I would remind them of that. But since we were teaching skydiving, I would tell them that if you don't listen in class, that weeds the class out really quick. So the ones that don't listen bounce on the first day, and they're not a problem anymore. We ship them home in a bag and tell their mama sorry and move on with the people that try. So.
Gotcha. Now, why do you think that maybe suppression or force, like you mentioned Gonzo, I think Bernard was another character. The character from the beginning of the book, I'm trying to remember, Stilson. Why do you think that natural leaders, right, like people that don't have to really earn the position, they're just kind of naturally, you know, alpha males or leaders of the pack, why do you think that it's almost always violence or force that shines through on most of them? Like, what is it about having to be a leader that kind of, or, you know, being that kind of way that forces people to follow you?
I'm not sure what you mean. What do you mean?
So if you look at some of the, like, the officers in the book, right?
Right.
The way that they led was with fear and with power.
Yes.
Yeah. Why do you think that, like, our past administration was a good example of that? That was very much a fear-driven, power-driven type of administration. Why do you think that those type of people end up getting power or leadership?
Because they're aggressive and they go after it. You know, passive people, you may have a bunch of passive people that might be great leaders, but they don't have the personality to be aggressive enough to go after it. Someone that's more aggressive will push past them. That's what it is. Aggression's not necessarily a negative thing if you apply it the right way. But everything can't be a confrontation. You can't get things done with constant confrontation. You know, eventually there has to be people. You have to be a leader that people want to follow. You know, a very basic thing that I ask myself about the people around me, the people that I might think of as a friend or as a boss or a leader or whatever, is, would I follow them into battle? Would I fight with them? You know, would I fight with you, Ralf? Yeah, I'd fight with you. Maybe even Jorge. You know, that's how I. You know, it seems kind of simplistic, but that's how I kind of gauge things when I fight with somebody. Yeah, that's, if I wouldn't go into battle with them, that's how I kind of gauge them, as, I don't know, friends. I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but so you're certainly not going to lead me. To be a leader, you have to know how to follow. That's the number one rule of being a leader. You cannot lead ever if you don't know what it's like to follow a leader. Because I think that in and of itself is the number one way to hone leadership skills, is to follow someone.
Gotcha. And do you have an example? Like, was there ever a time where you had like a real troublesome, um, a subordinate? I guess that's what you would call them. I don't know what the actual term is, like in the military when you have somebody under you.
Yeah. That's just normal everyday work, but eventually, by the time I became an officer, I had already been with my fire team for 2 years. So I worked with the same 5 guys. There were 6 of us. We worked together pretty much exclusively for, a half a dozen years. So I sort of lived in sort of a bubble. We would have, every once in a while, some senator would pull some strings and have their son sent down there to Panama to want to run around the jungle for some reason, pad a resume, something like that, So I'd have to deal with people like that, but they really didn't count, I wasn't really worried about instilling any kind of military bearing, making sure they understood leadership. We kind of really just wanted them to take their vacation and get on out of our way, because we had things to do down there. So I had a really isolated situation with a huge chunk of my time in the military. We were down in Central America doing things pretty much that didn't have anything to do with the rest of the country. Of course, we didn't know that. We thought we were keeping you safe. That's the story they were giving us. So, being kids, we didn't have any common sense back then. When you get fed that and encouraged, and yeah, you're young and you got old generals that are telling you, you're all we got. Go get it done, son. Yeah. You're going to go out and act a fool. Yeah.
And it seems like that's a very common mentality. Like, it doesn't matter what's being asked of you. It doesn't matter what you're required to do. It's what needs to be done.
Yeah, the mission is what is important. Right. That's all that matters.
Which kind of goes back into Graf, right? So you were telling me something pretty interesting about Graf, and that you kind of felt for him. You want to kind of dive into that a little bit?
Yeah, I absolutely felt for the man, because it was obvious that he cared about those kids, but he couldn't care about them because they were tools. He needed them no matter what it cost him to save the human race. But as a human being, it would have to be a horrible, horrible feeling to know that you basically groomed a child to commit genocide. You were willingly grooming that child to commit genocide and lying to the child the whole time. You'd have to be a really, really hard person for that to not impact you. I don't care who you are.
Yeah. And I thought it was interesting when he was talking to Anderson, which Anderson plays a much bigger part in the books than he.
That's true.
In the book it's a male. In the movie it's a female.
They glossed over Anderson in the movie. They really did.
Yeah, but he played a big role in like playing with the psychology, and then also they're kind of like the characters that fill you in onto information that's not really No, and I
Yep.
forget what kind of character those are called literally. Um, but I thought it was interesting when they're like, "Well, we'll let the courts decide after it's all said and done whether we were right or not."
Yeah.
So it's kind of one of those things like let history be the judge of what they were not a part of.
Well, I mean, you know, Graf's and the military's mindset was perfectly rational. You know, if you think about it, let's destroy them so that it never happens again. So on one end, it's like Thanos and Endgame. His logic was straight. You can't argue with that.
Yeah.
If we get rid of half of the life, that means resources are going to be so much more available. You can't argue with the logic of it, but the morality of it is where it gets you. And the same with Graf. I mean, you can't lead without having some moral compass. That's or it may have just been none of it will have been a machine, a robot leading the kids. So, of course, and he used the compassion that Ender thought that he actually had for him, as a tool, because they had the ultimate goal to complete, and that was to save humanity.
Right. And we talked about it on another podcast briefly, but aliens, right? Um,
Game over, man.
Game over. Is that what you think? It would really be game over?
You don't think we go hard on Earth?
To what? To have a bunch of insects roll on you like that?
Well, not exactly. So, I don't know if you ever saw the movie. Crap! I just. What'd you say, Jorge?
I said Independence Day. I think.
No, not. Well, actually, Ender's Game is kind of like a different take on Independence Day if you really look at it. Or Independence Day is a different take on Ender's Game because they're bug aliens, right? And they're trying to kill the Earth. No, but I think what I'm trying to say is a lot of people are scared of aliens because they think from the perception of a human or like what humans have historically done. We see a threat. Our first instinct is to eliminate that threat.
Kill
it. You just reminded me. There's a cartoon called 3 South, and it was like about like a college, right? But everyone that went to the college was really slow, right? Like not intelligent.
I think I know that.
But the funniest thing about that show was in the commercial, right? A girl drops a notebook and 2 guys come up behind her and they're like, "What is that? I don't know. Kill it." And they start kicking the notebook, right? Because they don't know what it is. And that's the first instinct. I think it's very interesting from Ender's Game that the intention of the buggers was not war.
No. They just wanted some water.
They wanted
to set a colony up and, drink some water. We had a lot of it.
Yeah, that's true. They're like, that's a planet. They have a ton of water. And explain to me again, because you did it in a really good way when we talked earlier about why it wasn't a declaration of war what they were doing.
So, like an ant colony, there's a queen. A termite colony, there's a queen. The queen just pretty much runs the show. And, you have drones and worker bees and soldier bees and ants the same. And in a lot of situations, drones can turn into workers and, workers can turn into soldiers if need be, whatever the situation demands. But they're basically just appendages of the queen, arms and legs, eyes and ears. And they just basically do the queen's bidding. They're her arms and legs. And, and so in the grand scheme of things, soldier ants go get into a fight, half of them get killed or whatever. It's no big deal to the queen. She lays more eggs because, she can grow more arms, more legs. And so the bugs basically figured that humans were the same, you know. And so when they come across the first human colony, okay, we'll kill these folks and say, hey, you know, to the queen. We're talking to the queen. Yo, we're here. Let's chat. We want some water. We're cool. And they didn't have the concept of individual thinking beings since they were a hive mentality. So it was simply just a miscommunication is all. They meant no harm. They wanted to be friends. And neither race knew how to communicate. That's what it boiled down to. And it ended up in genocide because the fact that they couldn't communicate, and at the end, the humans wouldn't communicate. That was the thing. The aliens were holding. They were holding at their planet. They weren't attacking. And Ender wanted to talk to them. But that was grass opening to have them basically destroy the planet. Better safe than sorry. Believe me, I can totally understand that. It's a horrible thought, but yeah, it makes logical sense if you want to keep your race safe.
I know in the beginning you said that you think that the children were genetically made. Do you ever think that we would get to a point further down the line where that would be the case for us as well? Just
absolutely
putting out soldiers just made specifically just to go and fight.
Absolutely, I absolutely do. That happens. That's happening today, and you know, the COVID-19 virus, the mRNA virus or vaccine, you know, messenger RNA. You know, you can tell that it'll send any message you want to, not just COVID-19 killing. Think about it. So, you know, somebody's going to figure out a tweak to give you a humongous amount of endurance. You know, you'll be able to go a long time without drinking, eating. You know, all of that's valuable out in the field because that's resources that you don't have to take, which means less weight. You know, which means you can carry more things to kill other people with, because that's basically the bottom line of humanity. The more advanced we get, the better we get at killing each other. You know, warfare is a innate part of humanity. It'll never go away, ever. It's what drives advancement. It's what drives technology. There aren't a lot of things that put fire under humans to do something other than war, whether it's for resources, power, whatever. But when war happens, resources get expended to make something happen, and we do it. Look at all the wars that we fought. World War II, for example. Look at the technological advances that came out of World War II.
Yeah, the atom bomb, right? Manhattan Project.
Many other things. So it is a huge driver of humanity. And logically, if you apply that to an alien species, think about it. We're going to expend resources, money, lives, whatever, to travel a vast distance to go to another planet for what? To look at it and turn around and go home? No. And so you got to expect that another race would do the exact same thing, because you have to be aggressive to do things like that. You have to have an aggressive nature. You're not going to find altruistic, you know, Star Trek version happy beings just passing by and going, yeah, we're a lot more advanced than you guys. Why don't we give you all of our technology? No, we don't want anything for it. No.
Well, don't you think if there was a civilization that was a lot more advanced than us, right? That, let's say, figured out peace on their world, right? They're able to travel between galaxies, which is, I don't think people realize, which you could probably put this into better words than I could, since you did study physics, right? You've told me this before. Yeah. They can basically, let's say, a civilization that could travel between galaxies, which would be a ridiculous amount of space. Like, the space between galaxies is bigger than the size of galaxies themselves, no?
Oh, not even remotely close.
right? So wouldn't don't you think like if they saw us humans, we would be really primitive to them? It would be like looking at monkeys smashing rocks at smashing each other with rocks. Like it would probably be that equivalent.
You walk into work every day, and when you do, you're walking on top of so much microbial life, insect life, that you don't see, that you don't care about. It doesn't mean anything to you. You don't notice it. It doesn't impact you. Might as well not be there. That's what we would be. They would not give us a second thought. We'd be nothing more than bacteria. You know?
No. Now, what do you think is a scarier thought? Aliens coming to Earth, or people eventually becoming the aliens that go visit other places?
I think it'd be better to be the person to initiate the contact and to be contacted out of the blue.
Oh,
I
well,
don't.
definitely. I kind of like. Have you seen the movie Arrival?
Yeah, it's been
Right.
a while.
So the aliens come, and they do the altruistic thing.
Hmm.
They're trying to integrate humans into their world, and by sharing their language, you kind of start messing with time, right?
Yeah,
Their language had to do something with time.
yeah.
But we, of course, because we don't understand them and we're impatient, and they've positioned themselves around the world. What's our first um what's our first instinct? Let's blow them up.
Fight or flight, man.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Fight or flight. Let's blow them up. But it's the altruistic thing. So my thing, I think I would be worried. Like, could you imagine if we come to a peaceful planet, like Avatar, right?
Yeah,
They're just they just want to sing to their spirit tree and make little blue alien babies. And here we are just blowing up their planet, taking their chunks of metal because that's what we want. I don't know. I think I would hope more for humanity than that, but I don't know if that would be realistic.
I'm gonna talk to
I mean,
Elon.
yeah. I
Elon?
mean,
Going to
you can
Mars soon.
you can look at. I mean, you can look at the state of our political situation right now and see that with everything that's going on, with this trial that's going on, that you know the people that are voting on this, they're more concerned about holding on to power than but doing the altruistic thing and doing what's right. And so that's humans. And so yeah, um, look at what happens and what has happened in the past when we've come across um, isolated tribes of people that we've come across, like in the Amazon, and they're Neolithic age, basically, people. And so we discover them, and they go from being happy Neolithic people living in the jungle off the land, living in harmony with the land that they live in, unlike humans today. To you go back and see the tribe 18 months later, and ramshackle huts have satellite dishes. People are wearing Homer Simpson T-shirts, and I literally did see this on Discovery Channel one night, you know, and uh, and so we pretty much destroy any society that we come across that is less advanced than we are. That's what we do. So the same thing would happen to us if a more advanced civilization found us.
Yeah. I think in history class they said that it takes 3 generations for people to fully assimilate into another culture. So, like you're right, it's always the stronger culture or the more powerful one, right? That's gonna gobble
Yep.
up,
Yep.
the other, rather than it really be affected. But one interesting thing that you mentioned is like, people vying for power, which is another um, part of Ender's Game, right? So we have Valentine and Peter, who honestly I thought that was part of probably one of the most interesting part of the books,
Yeah.
and it was not touched at all
It's
on the
too
movie.
complicated for the movie. It's
It
too
is
complicated.
too complicated. But so for those of you that have not read this book, the book came out in 1985, right? 1985, 1986. Maybe
Yeah,
that's when it got its
85.
popularity. So this is at this point 36 years ago. Okay. They were in this book. They talk about tensions between the U.S. and Russia, right? Basically, they were talking about tensions in the UN. They were talking about, children soldiers and stuff like that, which I think was a big case. There was like a lot of that, probably like in third world countries, and probably that's what
Yep.
inspired it. But what I think was most interesting about the book, and almost the most prophetic thing, was that the two characters that were Ender's brother and sister, right? Peter and Valentine, they basically set up fake profiles. So they were catfishing before catfishing was even a term.
Yep.
And then they started political banter, right? And they directly opposed one another, right? So Valentine, even though she was the most level-headed one, she had to be the radical character because that's what Peter wanted. And then
Yep.
Peter was the moderate to kind of show like a light and dark contrast compared to one another. But their goal was to cause division between adults, right?
Yep.
And create chaos in a political system so that when the time came, Peter could go ahead and save the day with his intelligence and basically take over, right?
Yep. Yep.
And did you watch Social Dilemma?
No.
No. Jorge, you watched it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, break it down for Randy, kind of what's going on in that.
What do you mean by that? I just
In the documentary, Social Dilemma.
basically they were kind of talking about like there's quite a few topics. I know one of them was like depression between children nowadays and between back in the day. How more like teens and preteens are getting depressed with social media and likes, and then they would go into these websites, and then they kept getting prompted more stuff from like one side. So they would get deeper and deeper and deeper into this one side, and then just get fed all this information, and not even see kind of like the contrast between the two sides that would happen in a regular conversation. You're basically getting fed all this information that this one group is thinking of. You're not getting other information as well to kind of balance it out, kind of say.
That's radicalization, is what that is.
Right. And social media is such I think has been such detrimental or such a detriment to kind of, instead of uniting people like you would think, like now we have the internet. Now we could finally talk to people like on the other side of the world without it being costly to us. And, we could all share ideas, but instead of it uniting us, it kind of radicalizes us because the what the social media cares about is for you to focus on being on social media. So it's going to keep feeding you what you like, right? It's kind of like,
Absolutely. It's the limbic system, man. You got to keep that limbic system satisfied.
right.
And the more you stimulate it, the more stimulation you need to keep it satisfied. And a lot of people that fall into these rabbit holes have an empty spot, I think, anyway. And then they find someone or something that tells them things that, hey, Raphael, Jorge, not a lot of people know this, but I'm going to let you in on this. And then that makes you special. It makes you part of something, and it sets you apart because you know stuff that I don't. You know the secrets that I don't, even if it's not true, but you believe it is because different, you know?
Yeah. And I think what was interesting about the book is that they were using misinformation to their advantage, right?
Absolutely.
They were using misinformation. They were using the fact that the government was using propaganda, right?
Absolutely.
Like by covering up part of the information, which the I've always it's kind of a scary thought of media or big powers at B having control of the information that we do and do not know, right? Which was also a huge part of Ender's Game. Like they didn't want people to not realize that the buggers didn't automatically go, "Hey, we give up," right?
Yeah.
They didn't want people to know that. They wanted it to seem like we crushed them into submission. Wasn't the fact that uh, what was his name? Mazer Reckham or Mazer Reckham? Yeah. They didn't want people to know that he kind of got lucky or that he kind of figured out the pattern and he got one kill and then that was it. That was the end of it. It was that easy. So I don't know. I think where we're at nowadays, it's pretty scary what people can do in social media, how much influence bad, or just how much influence any one person could have, right?
So influence is one thing, but I could literally sit right now while we're chatting and just pull up a meme photo on the internet, create some kind of verbiage on there that would trigger, depending on what that meme might be, that photo might be, post it online, and I guarantee you in a matter of hours, I'll have responses, shares. No one will check to see if it's legit because it'll say what those people that respond, it says what they want it to say. Doesn't
Right.
matter if it's true or not. And that's the world today.
Actually, that brings up a good point, and I know both of you are fans of this because we've talked about it before. But The Boys, right?
Hmm.
What was her name? Oh crap, I forgot. But the
The
character,
senator.
no, the girl that hooked up with Homelander, um, the one that she ended up being on. Spoiler for anybody that is still watching The Boys. Um,
Stormfront?
yeah, Stormfront. I was gonna say what she ended up
Oh,
being, but
with all her memes.
yeah, but she referred to them as her army, but she had people generating memes, and that's
Yeah,
how she was gaining influence.
absolutely.
And it's funny, but it's true that the right meme, right, something completely silly could put the wrong message into people's heads.
So my neighborhood here has a local, it's next door. You've probably heard of it. And so the next door part in my neighborhood here, they they were basically the curator, whatever. She set up a separate little thread for any kind of political discussion. You want to join in on political stuff? Here, this is the thread. The other day, there was a person who literally did nothing but respond with memes. Everything that anyone said, it came back with the most ridiculous, just ridiculous. And unfortunately, that's people today. That's just how it is. That's social media's fault. But on the other hand, it's people have a 3-second attention span now. It's just the way it is. You want your information in quick spurts.
Yep, we're in a microwave society.
Yep,
uh, the,
absolutely.
yeah, there's one of our sales guys that says that. By the way, Randy, I don't know if you know that, but he's like,
No,
we're in a microwave society. We want everything now, now, now.
it's absolutely true. I mean, I order something on Amazon, and of course I've got Amazon Prime, and Amazon tells me it's going to be 3 days before my stuff gets here, and I'm pissed. What? God, you know, but I'm old enough to remember when you ordered something from the mail back in my day, you might not get it for 3 months, and that was fine. That's just how it worked. You ordered something, heck, you forgot about it by the time it got there, you know. And so now it's instantaneous, you know. I see that in my kids. It's got to be now, 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 right now. And I get online. What? It's going to take 17 minutes to download this 3 gig file? God. All right. Let me go make a cup of coffee, you know. But I can remember when downloading 3 gig would have been unthinkable, you know. So it impacts all of us. We all want more and more, faster, faster, faster every day.
That's right. That's right. All right. Another thing that I wanted to touch on in this book, which I thought was really interesting. So the reason why I ever watched Ender's Game is because there was a controversy around it. Have you ever heard about that?
Mm-mm.
So there was a controversy on Ender's Game saying that that it was a racist book, and that it dealt with basically a very fascist way of thinking, you know, and that it was fascist propaganda. And it kind of makes me think of nowadays cancel culture, right? And me, I'm always a curious mind. When somebody says something's evil, you know, my first instinct is, well, I don't want to trust that. Let me find out. Let me judge for myself if something's really evil. Because if somebody says something is awesome, that's like not appealing to me. I'm like, okay, everybody thinks something is so cool and something so wonderful, which actually is kind of contradictory to this whole podcast because it's called Cult Fans Only, because it's about fans of stuff, right? Yeah. But it's also like, it's almost not as interesting as somebody saying something's evil. Like, I want to know what people's definition of evil is. So I checked out the book, and what I think is most interesting about this book is that people that call it fascist or racist obviously have not read the book.
Yeah.
Because a big part of the book was Ender having deep, deep remorse into being tricked into committing genocide. Because that's another thing. He didn't willfully commit genocide. He was tricked into it.
Yeah, absolutely. And he knew what he knew what he did.
Yeah,
he knew it.
Yeah, like Jorge.
After he committed genocide, it impacted him. You know, he didn't just go, well, they fooled me into doing it, so you know, really wasn't my fault.
Yeah, and I think in the book he mentioned after he was fighting a couple of his enemies, that he said, "In the moment when I truly understand my enemy, I understand him well enough to defeat him. And in that very moment, I also love him." And I think it's impossible to really understand somebody, what they want, what they believe, and not love them in the way they love themselves. So it definitely affected him, even fighting some of those kids on before he took out all those buggers.
And I'm glad you said that quote, Jorge, because that in essence is the lesson of the book. Like, you think you hate somebody, but once you fully understand where they come from, where that's where vulnerability comes in, right? When you know somebody, right, you know their weak points. That's when they're most vulnerable. That's when you can strike. That's when you can destroy. But that's also where you find empathy and where you find the human connection, you know? And I think that was ultimately, oh my God, I'm having such a bad memory day. But the author's name, Scott or Card.
Orson Scott Card.
Yeah, Card. I think that was Card's message. Like, hey, you know, you think people hate each other, but they really don't. They just don't really understand each other. And then ultimately, Ender finds the egg. And you were telling me a little. So I haven't read any of the other books, but you were telling me a little bit about the books and how it kind of continued on. Can you kind of jump into that?
So, of course, Ender finds the last queen is in contact with Ender through the mind game. Remember the mind game in the book and the movie. So they only mention it in the movie one time, that humans had gotten a hold of some alien technology called the Ansible, and the Ansible was technology that allowed instantaneous communication, no matter the distance between, um, which is based on, and you know this, Ralph, entanglement, particles that are entangled. And so, no matter, once they're entangled, no matter how far apart you split those particles across the entire universe, when you impact one of the particles, the other one reacts in the opposite manner, no matter the distance. And Einstein called it spooky action at a distance because he had no explanation for it. But it's what happens, and it's been tested. Even I think it was last year or maybe a year before last, Japanese scientists entangled two particles on Earth and then launched one of the particles into orbit, and it still happened. They tested it. It's provable and testable. So that, I always thought that was really cool, but they only kind of glossed over it, you know, in the book. So, wow, I lost my train of thought. I'm old too.
That happens to me all the time, Randy.
But yeah, because I was geeking on physics.
Yeah,
Like,
man,
talking about,
we love it.
and I noticed in the movie they didn't really talk about it too much. Again, because it was a movie and the book was very complicated. But these battles between the Formics didn't happen just, you know, over and over and over. There were like many years because the distance involved between these battles, and that's why they were finding these children to train up, because they had years in between. And like you were talking about Mazer Rackham and his lucky strike, you know, um, in the book they put him on a ship traveling at relativistic speeds so he would not age until they could find a candidate that he could train. And he mentioned in the movie and in the book as well that he tells Ender, "You're not the first one I've trained." And Macer was not didn't he didn't think Ender had it in him to do it, and everyone else did, and Graf did, and my favorite character, and even my wife watched Ender's Game with me last night, and even she noticed it too, was Sergeant Dap. And Sergeant Dap told Ender right at the beginning, "You'll never be I'll never salute you, ever." And Ender said, "Yeah, you will." And one of the things that my wife noticed was when Ender ended up committing genocide there and basically collapsed, and Sergeant Dap was carrying him into his room to put him on his bed, and my wife was like, look how gently he's carrying him, you know, because Dap had respect for him, you know. He earned his respect as a soldier, and being an ex-soldier, that's really that's a big deal, you know.
Oh yeah,
That's a huge deal.
I can't imagine what it takes to be a good leader in the military. Like, just the idea of serving in the military to me is pretty rough. Like, I have a deep respect for people that serve, because I've seen, like, on some old buddies that I know, like, the effect that it had on them. So it's like a deep respect thing, but then also just on top of that, like, having to earn the respect of each other must be
Oh yeah,
tough.
yeah. And but it's very, you know, it's you make really good friends in the military. I will tell you that. You make the best friends you could ever have in the world in the military. Lifelong friends.
I feel that. I feel that. Um, Another scary thing was that it was all a video game. The whole thing,
Yeah,
right? Or that's how they posed it. And
yeah.
Jorge is quite a gamer. So like it, and you know how you said that we might be trying to come up with super soldiers. My opinion is actually that we're not. I think we're already conditioning future generations to maybe be ready for battle through video games.
Drone pilots.
I forgot which movie it was, but it was basically they looked like they were in those like shipping containers that or kind of looked like shipping containers where like the drone pilots are.
Jack
And
Ryan.
like was it Jack Ryan?
Yeah, it was Jack Ryan. The show, the second season.
Where they had like no, but no, this was a movie, and they had shipping containers that looked like where drone pilots would be at, but they were dropping in like robot troopers into like foreign areas, and they would control them, and it looked exactly like a video game. But they were just sitting in their boxers halfway across the world, just controlling these robots. And when somebody would die, just pop up another one, go back.
Oh
in.
yeah, that's definitely how it'll be.
And you're right, it was a movie. I'm sorry, my bad. I thought you were talking about Jack Ryan, the guy who like bombed somebody and like was traumatized from it. But the controller that he was using to control the bomber was a PlayStation controller. I thought that's what you were gonna say. No, but that's crazy. I think that's a legit thing. Like I don't know if it's the PlayStation controller or the Xbox controller, but the control for some of these drones, that's what they use.
Yeah, because look at where the drone pilots are coming from. They're coming from years of playing video games, man. It's a brilliant strategy. Why not take advantage of the skill sets that almost every young person has?
Now, I'm not gonna lie. I'm a little scared of Asia and the amount of amazing, brilliant tacticians that they have from years of playing League of Legends and different MOBA games.
Those first-person shooters. There.
Oh yeah, no. I think U.S. is for number. Well, actually, no, Europe, because all of the years and years that they played Counter-Strike.
Counter-Strike, yeah.
Dude, the European teams on Counter-Strike, there's something fierce, bro. Yeah.
If you look at anything like Call of Duty or anything like that, what's like console-based, U.S. has that.
Yeah, that's where the U.S. shines.
So I was a hardcore gamer back in the early, probably I ended up really slacking off in the early 2000s, but I played Rainbow Six, Ghost Recon. Yeah, I was a hardcore Rainbow Six player, and this was right at really when broadband was just pretty much readily available everywhere. And one of my friends had this little server called Battlecom, and it was a voice server, and one of the very first attempts at having VoIP, and we had a little VoIP server, and we would dominate in Rainbow Six tournaments because we could talk to each other, and that was not unheard of. And there were a number of times where our matches we'd get stopped because they were sure we were cheating, and it's like, no, we're talking to each other. What? Yeah, we're using voice comms, and that was so long ago, but it made such a huge impact in gaming. And I think I did play the very first Call of Duty, or maybe it was Battlefield. I think it was Battlefield. It was Soap McTavish, whichever game that was, if you guys remember. It was either
Soap, I think, is Call of Duty.
I think it was Call of Duty. I played the very first Call of Duty and the very first Crisis, and that was the last real hardcore gaming I did.
Yeah, now you're talking Jorge's language, because you lost me there. I'm like, Soap? I've never heard of that. Randy, you just dated yourself, and Jorge's like, yes. Let me bust out my video game connoisseurness.
Yeah, Soap is Call of Duty for sure.
No, Soap is also an API protocol too, so relax, Jorge.
No, but you said McTavish. That's his name. That's Modern Warfare right there.
Yeah. But for Jorge's sake, it's also a API protocol.
Yeah. When you're reading error logs and you see Soap on there.
Oh, yeah. You eat what you kill.
Yeah. Eat what you kill.
Yeah.
We got off on a tangent there.
Oh yeah. No, I mean that's part of what we always do. I mean it's kind of a constant with us. We're always gonna get off on tangents and stuff like that. Yeah.
Well,
Um,
I have been playing Airborne Kingdoms here lately. Highly recommend it.
Airborne
Yeah.
Kingdoms.
Um, y- so I'm an old SimCity player. I've been playing SimCity before. Uh, can you see her? That's Christy.
Hello. Thank you for letting us borrow him.
So Christy and we met back in 1990, I think it was, and yeah, and so we ended up getting married, and we were married till '96. But boy, like the last 2 or 3 years we were married, I discovered Sim City, y'all. I was toe up with some Sim City, and then you know, and then Duke, there's Duke Nukem.
Dude, she's airing out all your dirty video game laundry.
Oh yeah, she'll tell you. And I had remember I had all the throttle, the joystick and the pedals and all that groovy stuff. And and then and then and then we got divorced. But then 25 years later we get married again, and I'm still playing. Uh, it's not Sim City, but it's Airborne Kingdoms where your city flies. Okay, and so you you have to you have so much weight to thrust ratio to keep your city in the air, and you've got to build on it, and you've got to keep it balanced or it'll tip over and everybody will fall off. And yeah, it's a pleasant, it's not combat oriented, it's mostly just your goal is to reunite all the kingdoms of the land by flying to all their cities and doing their quests that they ask of you and stuff. I highly recommend it. Yeah.
That kind of sounds like Immortal Engines, but like airplane
Kind,
style.
yeah, kind of.
That'd be pretty cool. Pretty cool. All right, I do have a couple more questions for Ender's Game, and one of them, it's interesting that kind of like a religion gets formed at the end of it, right?
Yep.
And Peter, he's not really an antagonist, but he kind of is, in the sense that he's almost like what'd you say, Jorge?
I said at least in the beginning he is.
Oh yeah, in the
Beating
beginning
up on Ender.
that's right. That's right. He is in the beginning, but he is kind of like a Machiavellian type character
Oh,
for sure.
absolutely.
But in the end, he kind of confesses his sins, right? Which you told me there's a bit of an allegorical component to all of the Ender Games saga. But he kind of like changes in the end, right? And says, "Hey, I want you to be my speaker," he tells Ender, because that's kind of like the prophetical position, right? Where you kind of somebody confesses to you, and then you kind of
Yes.
like reconcile the good and the bad. Do you think that you're a wiser person than we are? That's how I'll put it. Um, from what you've seen in life, can people change their colors? Like, do people change over time?
Absolutely. Absolutely, people can change their colors unless there's a pathological reason for them not to. You know, a lot of people have a problem admitting their their issues, their shortcomings. Once I started being able to do that, believe me, it changed a lot. When I first got out of the military and came into the civilian IT world, I couldn't really see how people got things done. And my Christy was in IT. My wife was in IT when we first met, and she'll tell you, I throw elbows, man. I'll walk all over you to get past, to get to the top. Why? Because we're in competition, man. You know, and either you do it or I'm going to do it, and that doesn't make a lot of friends. It doesn't make a lot of allies, because in the civilian world you have to behave differently than you do in the military. You know, and aggression and that type of stuff is, it's not necessarily promoted, but it's not frowned upon, to be aggressive to get what you want. And but I've learned over the years that it doesn't work that way in the civilian world. And you work with me. I try to be a compassionate, helpful, anything that I know, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to teach you, I'm going to show you if I can. Because if I can lift you up, that just makes me look golden, And so sharing the wealth, being compassionate, that makes for a better leader, I think, And that's how I changed my colors, as, to being a more compassionate, more social person. I had a lot of problems with not that I'm an antisocial or I don't have social skills. At first, when I came into the civilian world, I didn't see the need for it in the business world. I'm there to work, Well, it doesn't work that way in the normal world. And I had to learn that, and I did, and it changed me for the better, I hope. So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I have fun with you at work. I don't think neither Jorge or I would be on, wanting to do an episode with you if so, we don't feel like you're that tough. Well, you are tough, obviously. You've gone through stuff in life, but I'm talking about like you're not that hard-shelled, don't talk to me, I'll elbow you kind of guy. So
yeah,
you've definitely made some progress if that's how you used to be.
I used to be that way. Yep.
Got you. All right. And there's a question that I kind of like ending these things on, because what we're talking about is entertainment, right? And I think a lot of people see entertainment as trivial, not important. But I really think, I think entertainment not only says a lot about the person making it, but it also says a lot about society and as people, and sometimes you could be more honest with fiction than you can in truth, right? So, or in regular life. So my question to you is, do you think stories like Ender's Game or literature or books, maybe even epic poems like the Iliad and stuff like that, do you think that sort of stuff can change the world?
It has. Yeah, absolutely. Yes, words have impact. That's an absolute fact, that words have impact. So yes, 100% I believe it.
Wonderful. Randy, we've been going at it for a little while now, so I don't think there's a better way to kind of end things up. But I've also started a new tradition.
Yeah.
And it kind of puts my guests on the spot, but I love doing it. But come up with some closing words for us, man. Some words of wisdom or something funny or something that is important to you. I don't care what it is. Just make it impactful. Make it important.
So
no pressure.
I don't know. Since you youngins, and all I can say is this. My advice to you: stack fitties, pet kitties, and suck titties.
All right.
Good
Randy.
night and Godspeed.
Randy, there is no better way to end it. Thank you so much. Randy, everybody. Have a good night.